The B2B buying journey has changed. So in this video, I'm going to run through the updated LinkedIn ads playbook, which should help you grow your B2B brand this year. We'll be running through the 3 F's of the LinkedIn ad funnel. This should help you with not only how you should structure your account, but the objectives for each stage of the funnel, as well as the different types of content you should be utilizing. On top of this, we'll also be touching on some consumer psychology and its role within each stage of the funnel. Why listen to us? We manage millions of pounds of LinkedIn and Google ads spend each year for B2B brands. We've literally built our own LinkedIn ads attribution software. We have pictures of LinkedIn all around the office, and we actually have LinkedIn ads commenting on our LinkedIn ads about how good our LinkedIn ads are. And if that's not enough, I got a pair of LinkedIn socks for my Secret Santa. So yeah, we like LinkedIn ads. Enough about my socks. Let's jump into the framework. So the first section of the funnel that I want to jump into, and the first F, is framing. Now, before we get into what framing is, let's first look on the left-hand side at audience notes. And this is very much from an audience perspective going to be the first touch point in many cases with the brand. Now, this can be from targeting through LinkedIn, firmographics and demographics. So size of company, person within the company that we're targeting, what's their job position, what industry is that company in or that person in, sort of general firmographics. Or it can also be account-based list. So you have a target list from an account-based marketing perspective you're going after, or you have a certain patch that you're going after. You can also upload that list within here as well. Next, we want to move on to the framing core components. Now, there's a few different primary formats of ad that we want to be running at this point in time to really get the best bang for our buck and make sure that we can actually appear inside the feed in a memorable way. Those 3 formats are going to be carousel ads, static image ads, and video ads. I'll get onto the different ad types later that you can use. These are the 3 that we found to be the most effective from a scroll stopping perspective initially, especially with the types of content which we're coming onto. From a metrics perspective, you can play around with these, but say, for example, we find typically that it's about 10 to 50,000 audience size. LinkedIn recommends going bigger, but in a lot of cases we found, especially in the UK, for example, that this is the size of the audience, or if you are going across, the US or EMEA as a whole, you can narrow it down into certain job titles and actually get quite narrow with the audiences you're going after to really keep that control. It also depends on things like how much budget you have. So you can always play around with these metrics. But say, for example, for a 50,000 person audience size, you want to keep the ad frequency to less than 3, and that's per month. So you want to make sure that the same person isn't seeing the same ad 3 times per month, which is slightly different to the next one, which is audience frequency. And we're saying here that try and keep it to around about 9 or less per month of the people seeing any one of your ads within the audience. So that could be someone seeing this, 3 different ads 3 times, for example, creating an audience frequency of 9. It could be to someone seeing different ads each time, but seeing it 9 times. You can kind of play around with that. You probably can go slightly over, but we don't want to be bombarding these people with messages at this stage of the funnel. And the objective here finally is all around engagement. We want to go back and look at the best types of performing ads from an engagement level. Are people commenting? Are people liking? Are people sharing? Are people actually physically getting in contact with you off the back of it? Now, even if someone does submit a form and they convert and they want to get a quote for your company or pricing or start a demo, we still want to take them through the next stages as well to sort of keep building that credibility, which is something I'll get onto in the second. Now, the type of this content, the main ones we found to be great, which actually help frame our product. Framing really comes down to how something is presented, which can change the perception of it. So we want to frame it in the best possible scenario. So for example, we could be framing it as the better alternative to what they're currently using through video, carousel, or static image. We could be, framing it as how it's going to make your job easier than it currently is. We could be framing it as who it's currently helped. So contextually, we could frame it as a testimonial ad, which actually then lists within that testimonial ultimately what it's helped that person with. And so for the type of content, we're framing it using framing. We want to make sure we, getting across our value prop. So we're using it, use cases and testimonials, and then comparison to what they're currently doing and trying to bridge that gap to the pain point they may currently be experiencing. So their problem, the solution, your product in the middle. And just touching on the psychology as a side note, there's a few different things I want to touch on, but quite quickly. And the first one is a trigger event. And a trigger event is very much a psychological event that happens when someone first decides or feels like they need or want your product or service. This could be emotional. For example, they feel like they're struggling with workloads. They need to help streamline processes. It could be situational, that their bosses asked them, or they've just been promoted. They're looking for something new. Or it could be social, that people are talking about a certain product or service and you can sort of jump on that bandwagon. So when you're framing the product through those different formats and those different types of content, think about it as a trigger event. We then go on to framing, which I just touched on, about how we actually perceive the product to make it more valuable to the audience, how you're going to bring that all together. Then using things like social proof, using the testimonials to bring that in at this first touch point as well can be super powerful. Use cases, testimonials, and then on a slightly different point, the halo effect, which then leads into the self-fulfilling prophecy. So halo effect is all around someone's first touch point with a brand. If it's positive, then further down the line, they'll be looking for other things which may not be as positive, but they'll actually, view them with rose-tinted glasses because their first touch point was so positive. Therefore, the self-fulfilling prophecy of what they've seen, and then further down the line. So this first touch point is super important. It's why we recommend using these formats. It's why we recommend using these types of content to put them out there, and you can get super creative, and then over the months, you can see the best performing types of content from an engagement perspective, and then you can optimize around those bits of content and then keep updating that creative from a first touch point. And the second F is frequency. So what we want to do now is go down to anytime someone engages with one of these ads, for example, we then go on to from the first touch to the second touch. And this is going to be very similar to, say, a B2C counterpart campaign where you go onto Amazon, you put something in your cart, and for the next 30 days, you get hit with all the ads across, email, Facebook, Instagram, around the thing that you have in your cart, trying to get you and incentivize you to come and check out. Obviously, this is B2B, so it's slightly different as the buying journey is very different, and the people who make the decisions are much more than in B2C in a lot of cases, but it's very similar concept. So anyone who engages with this, we want to put them in a 30-day high frequency. Depending on your buying journey, product, ACV, you can make it, 30, 60, 90 days. It doesn't really matter. But in this case, it says 30. Anyone who engages with any of the above ads in the framing side of things, anyone who clicks on the ads, anyone watches, say, 50% of our videos, we know they're engaged. We want to make sure anyone who follows our LinkedIn company page, we can add them in there and layer it with the firmographics or account lists. Also, people click on your Google ads, or anyone who goes to your website and visits your website, then we can now bring these people into our second touch. Because even though the first touch hasn't come from LinkedIn, they've still had an engagement with your brand, which has hopefully framed their mindset around what it is that you offer. So now they're going into a high frequency audience. Now, from a format perspective, we want to make sure that we use all of the above, so we can still use a lot of the same ads, but just at a much higher frequency. Because, for example, someone may have only seen a value prop ad in this one, but hasn't seen the other use cases and comparisons. These can be in there as well, but the whole purpose is to make it at a higher frequency, which I'll get onto. So we want to make sure we use all of the above. We also want to leverage thought leadership ads here. This is very similar to the ads that you can run from your company page, but ultimately these thought leadership ads are quite new from LinkedIn, but you can actually run paid promotion from individuals ads like company owners, sales teams, directors, whoever you're running these ads from. You can actually start promoting the individual within the company who's running these ads. It's a really good way of building that trust and building that credibility within the company and putting faces to names and actually bringing in more types of content that isn't just a faceless branded company. I've got a whole video around thought leadership ads, which I'll link to up here as well, which you can go into and how you can utilize that and internal influencer marketing in B2B this year. In-mails are one of my favorite from this section. It's because ultimately someone's engaged with your brand. You can create an audience, and for example, you can then start what we call conversation ads, which ultimately pings off the people that have engaged with your first step, and it can either give them more case studies, give them more information, give them opportunity to reach out to the sales team natively within the platform without pushing them away to a website. And then thought leadership and in-mail will be the primary, and text and document, I'd say you can use those as well, but those are going to be sort of secondary touch points. Slightly cheaper. Texts are great because you just have them on desktop, for example, so it's sort of like when someone's probably sitting at work on the desktop. And document ads are good if you're going to be promoting sort of a longer form piece of content, but won't touch too much on these. Now, the frequency section is super important. For example, we find this audience size typically has under around 10K of this sort of, if we had a 50K initial audience size. And depending on obviously how long the frequency is. At this point, we want to make sure that no ad has been seen more than 6 times. Again, I'd probably try and keep that to around 3 to stop getting the same person to see the same ad so many times, but it all depends on how much creative you have available. The audience frequency is the important one. You make sure it's over 20. So we want to be making sure there's at least one touch point pretty much per working day that month, so they're actually seeing a vast variety of different ads. And the objective here is conversion. We want to get different types of ads which prompt people to get in contact and then sort of show everything at it. We've deemed there may be an organizational intent from, external channels like Google Ads or from that first touch point. So just trying to get in front of them as, physically possible to try and capture all demand that is there. And if it's not there and we're not capturing demand in this time, we're starting that process of creating demand. So the type of content, again, you can use all of the above, plus the director employee posts. We want to sprinkle in some high intent. Like I mentioned, first touch point, we're framing the product. We're not trying to get that high intent touch point. We're just trying to get someone to consume it. And then finally, things like product loops, service loops, how you work it, and just throwing in all the testimonials and case studies you guys have at a really high frequency for the next 30 days. Now, within this, from a psychological perspective, there's a couple of different things I want to touch on. One is just the mere exposure effect. This has shown that if you show up a lot more in someone's feed, you're, by default going to be trusted more, and therefore people are more likely to buy for you. So getting this high frequency is super key. Anchoring as well is trying to state what they're currently doing. Is it costing them money? Is yours a cheaper alternative to get the same result? This also kind of ties into loss aversion as well, which I haven't listed down here. But the main one as well I try and focus on here is social currency, which is slightly different as social proof. And social currency is how can they see actually their peers agree with what it is you're selling, know it's a good product and everything else. And this is very much when you have ads or you have thought leadership posts which have lots of likes, lots of comments, lots of engagement of people agreeing, great conversation, great debate in them. This is when you can start amplifying those posts which have a really good impact, because if someone sees lots of different marketing managers or people that they know communicating within these comments, or people in a very similar position, they're much more likely to pay notice and actually not think it's just another ad that's being run for a couple of days, hasn't been thought about, and no one really cares about it outside of the company that's promoting it. Again, make sure these things are used responsibly. Don't just be throwing them out there here, there and everywhere to try and manipulate people into buying. It's all going to be based off actual real world testimonials, real world reviews, and actually around real world engagement which you guys are putting out into the world and adding value. So we have the frequency, and if someone hasn't engaged in that 30-day period, they then go into a long touch. And what I've kind of haven't mentioned here is you want to exclude everyone in the frequency stage in this first touch. So as soon as someone sees one of these ads and clicks, you want to exclude this audience they're now in. And then you want to do the same with what we call the long touch, which ultimately is excluding anyone from the long touch from this frequency here. So we want to make sure that anyone from 30 days to 365 days is in this audience. No one goes straight into this audience, for example. And again, I'll link at the end to a video which shows you how to set up a LinkedIn ads account, which includes audience at the end of that video as well, which will make this super clear. Now, this third F is called forget me not. So yeah, framing, frequency, and forget me not. It's a bit on the nose, and we have to think of a third F just to make it sound cooler. But this is pretty much what it says on the tin. From a format perspective, we're running very similar ads, as well as potentially using secondary spotlight and event ads. Metrics, we're trying to use a very similar frequency to framing. We don't want to spam again. We've kind of gone through the high frequency, high intent interest phase, and now we're just maintaining. The types of content that we should be pushing out here are going to be content which brings people and draws them back into the brand. We want to know that potentially if we've done framing correctly, they have a good idea of what our brand is and the use cases behind that and how we can save them money or make their life easier. We framed it correctly. We then gone through a high frequency 30 to 90 day period in which they understand more about our use cases, they understand about our team, they understand the way we think about marketing, but they haven't converted yet. So now we take the foot off the gas, stop pestering them, and we want to therefore start doing things like we have events. So maybe they didn't want to sign up online, but they may want to come to an event to meet you guys in person. So you can bridge that gap between offline and online. You can then use things like updates. So you launch a new product. Maybe your old products weren't worth it for them, but you have sort of like a new offering which could be better suited to them. Launch that. You have new videos. So for example, for me in our long touch audience, I could upload a video like this around LinkedIn strategy, and someone may not be interested in buying, but we know they've seen our ads around what our company offers. They've seen sort of the high frequency use cases and clients that we've helped, and then now they want to just see more info content around the subject matter they're interested in. So if they move jobs, have budget, whatever it may be, it may open up to work with. So you can kind of use whatever you want in here. Just keep it low frequency. You can use a lot of it. Just keep updating it with different ad creative. And these people are sort of your nurture, sort of email list type audiences. And the things I like about this as well is you can move on to the psychology perspective. There's going to be two main things you're looking at. One is the authority bias in the fact that if you can keep offering value. You're doing a podcast, for example, with someone who's well known in the space. You've been featured in TechCrunch. All of this stuff is going to sort of add to the perception of your authority, in which people are going to sort of trust you more and more. So you're building that up. So make sure you link to any sort of third-party press and all of that stuff. Don't worry too much about attribution at this stage. Next one is a reciprocity. I can never say it. And this is around when you're giving away so much value that people feel that they've earned sort of like some, return of that value in itself, whether that's going to be money, time, whatever it may be. So if you're giving away really valuable, everything from relevant ebooks to data and research to training to software products for free, potentially, you're building up that goodwill. So in the future, if they do then end up engaging with one of the forget-me-nots, they're then going to go straight back into the frequency again, because they then engaged with one of the ads, which takes them back into the high frequency area. So you can kind of see how this loop and flywheel happens of advertising and marketing. We're always trying to find the best performing ads to get someone into the funnel. We're then hitting them with a lot of different frequency ads to give us a really good opportunity, like to show the social proof and to show that we're a good company to work with, and getting back in front of them at a faster and more frequent scale. And the forget me not is very much a nurturing to make sure that we can keep engaging with these people that have gone through the initial stages. And I'd probably kind of frame this being what we call the old top of funnel, the frequency being bottom of funnel, sort of high call to action, trying to get the conversion, and then the forget me not being the mid funnel. So not the typical top, middle, bottom. It's going to be top, bottom, middle at the end, because it's very much around timeline and how much someone's shown intent into your product that we should be advertising. It shouldn't be like, okay, they've seen this ad, they should now see this one, they should now go through this sequence. It's very different to how it used to be, and the B2B buying model is always changing. The more educated customers are getting, quite rightly so, the B2B marketing landscape is changing. I hope you found that useful. If you actually want to know how to set up a LinkedIn ad, which includes setting up audiences and these sort of workflows, click on this ad up here, and it should show you everything that you need to know. Any questions, back them in the comments. But until next time, guys, thank you so much for listening.